average, 1 in 9 girls and 1 in 20 boys have experienced sexual assault during their childhood. I can be counted within that statistic. Sadly, the aftermath of such traumatic experiences can inflict severe and enduring effects on the victims and survivors alike. On our platform, we strive to spark conversations about controversial topics that matter. Thank you for joining us for Sex, Drugs, and Spirituality, where we navigate the power of personal growth, self-discovery through exploration and acceptance of our shadow selves.
Thank you so much, Jackie. And thank you, everyone, for joining us for our first episode where we will lift the veil around childhood sexual trauma, the devastating effects, and the different spiritual healing modalities we've used to transmute and integrate these intense energies and experiences. But before we delve into our main topic today, allow us to introduce ourselves. I'm Elizabeth Maria, and I am so happy and honored to be here and to join Jackie Lyons for this amazing podcast experience. My company is Elizabeth Maria Unlimited, and I offer writing services, holistic health advocacy, and intuitive guidance. My work is informed by the healing modalities I used in my own healing journey, as well as my background as an English lecturer, social worker, Kaveh poet, and vegetarian chef. And Jackie, a little bit about you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Welcome, everybody. My name is Jackie Lyons of Akashic Energy Healing, and I'm a holistic energy healer. As a certified soul realignment practitioner, my specialty lies in harnessing the power of the Akashic records. My goal is to assist clients in balancing their energy and learning to understand their karmic cycles. I'm so grateful and thankful that you guys could all take time to join us today for such an in-depth look at this topic.
Thank you, Jackie. Childhood sexual trauma is an alarming reality that has severe and lasting consequences on the spiritual well-being and emotional development of individuals. Today, we delve into the traumatic effects and shed light on the crucial importance of healing from such experiences. By exploring the traumatic journey and emphasizing the significance of healing, we aim to raise awareness and encourage support for those affected.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So I really want to take a moment and first focus on the lingering effects that such experiences can have. What are these traumatic effects, and how can they shatter our inner understanding of trauma? So the first one I want to talk about is shattered trust. Childhood sexual trauma violates a child's trust. This betrayal of trust by adults or peers or family members sometimes really does lead to difficulties in forming intimate and trusting relationships later in life. And I do feel this on a really deep level. And it is hard to allow yourself to have that sense of feeling like you're out of control. You really want to control every situation, and not necessarily can you. Can you relate to that yourself, Elizabeth?
Oh, 100%. 100%. It's like the more I felt, I mean, really before I started, the accelerated part of my healing journey, I was a complete control freak, needed to, make sense of everything on the exterior because I felt so lost on the interior. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. I feel the same way in my situation as well. And the thing for me is I didn't correlate the two at that point. So yeah, that's definitely one of the first ones. But another one we want to touch base on is emotional dysregulation. Traumatic sexual experiences during childhood will disrupt your emotional regulation. It will lead to possible extreme mood swings, heightened anxiety, depression, in my situation, I feel like it led to this hyper observant behavior. And that continued to manifest throughout my adulthood. And thinking about it now, actually, maybe attributed to some of the situational awareness that I tend to have, just being so aware of any situation I was walking into, where the exits are, you know, when I'm in a cab and I'm drinking, what landmarks did we go past? Did he miss the turn? It's always there. And that one really
vigilance,
touched
right?
to me. So the next thing we want to talk about is distorted self-perception. And I don't know about you, Elizabeth, but in my case, I don't really feel as strongly connected to this one. I think I always had a really strong sense of self. I didn't really understand how to manage myself, but maybe you could speak on this on your personal journey.
Well, with absolutely distorted self-perception has been, I feel a profound effect on me. You know, experts say that it can result in body image dissatisfaction. I went honestly throughout my entire 20s just wanting to get liposuction. I always looked at my body like it wasn't good enough, that I was somehow not worthy enough. I also went through many incredibly unhealthy relationships around sex and sexuality. So I definitely feel that overall my self-perception after experiencing childhood trauma was that my body was, honestly, I felt that I was unworthy. And could I articulate that at the time? No, but it came out by, the men that I allowed into my inner circle, the way that I thought about my body and myself, and the way that I interacted sexually with men. For a long time, it was almost like I was like kind of mentally conditioned to believe that, the woman's body was honestly, for the pleasure of the man. And I mean, it's probably one of the hardest things for me to really, to accept that I spent so many years focusing on, not being worthy enough of even feeling that love and pleasure myself, but just focusing on
gosh, thank you so much for sharing. So the funny thing is, and the thing that I love about our show is, since you were able to explain, how your perception was affected, that then allowed me to see that my answer before was incorrect. There was a lot of different ways that manifested for me. And it really goes back to the first one was really needing to have that sense of control. And because I was so dissociated, I guess, that from sex or my body, I didn't have feelings that I guess normal people would have, where they feel like they want sex or being horny, I guess,
right.
for lack of a better word. But what I got off on was knowing that the person wanted it more than I did. So that gave me a sense of control, and that was, my kind of thing in that sense. But thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, well, this is what this podcast is about. Those hard truths. I mean, I'll tell you, it was, probably a 20-year run of having no cognizant understanding of how it was that I was interacting with my body and with men. Because I had just disassociated so much from it that I was just like, okay, whatever it is you want, I guess that's what I'm supposed to do, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, so really huge, really huge.
Really huge. Thank you. And then the fourth one that we want to talk in this vein here, it would be relationship challenges. And I think this is true even more so if there's childhood sexual trauma, because if you're not with a partner who is ready and willing and able to meet you where you're at, which could be in a very confusing place for even you to understand for yourself, and then let alone try to explain it to a partner, that can be incredibly challenging, and it leads to the dissociated behavior where you are just doing it for, you know, the man's benefit or whatever in
Right.
that case, like you were mentioning. But I find that in my experiences, my attachment mechanism to the relationships that I had were directly related to what the incident that had happened. And that's why, you know, I chose people with certain energetic qualities or,
Mm.
you know, characteristic traits that made me feel safe. And those traits ended up being either people, because I feel energy, so either people who were genuinely male energies with a genuine comforting secure energy, I could feel that, or aggression. And aggression
Mm.
to me
Mhm.
was a trait that my dad had, and my dad was the only guy that, you know, ever protected me and I could trust 100%. But I attributed the aggression to love later on in my attachment style, and that aggression was what could protect me. I didn't realize it, you know, till now, but yes, that was definitely an attachment there for me. But I did want to kind of leave off this topic with a quote from Peter Levine, and I'm going to read it out for you guys as best I can. I'm best off script, but we will go ahead and do a little scripted quote for you guys because it really suits the topic of today.
It does.
So we'll go ahead and do that. And we do love Peter Levine. So thank you for your beautiful work. And if you guys have a chance to go and check him out, please do. Okay, here we
Yeah.
go. The symptoms of trauma can be stable, that is ever present. They can also be unstable, meaning that they can come and go and be triggered by stress, or they can remain hidden for decades and suddenly surface. Usually, symptoms do not occur individually, but come in groups. They often grow increasingly complex over time, becoming less and less connected with the original trauma experience.
Mm. That is such a profound quote to me, because that is how the traumatic effects have kind of come to the surface in my experience, is that it is kind of an ever-present angst, or it has been. But also, you know, the idea of becoming triggered with stress, it has taken me years to realize that stress is one of the biggest triggers for me, and I just go straight into disassociation and just you know, and I know that we're not on the drug episode yet, but
For me, huge changes, right?
yeah,
Big changes get, like I said, take me out of my comfort zone. I'm not in control, right? I have to be, or I had to be that in control. So yes, I feel that one, that statement, that quote on a deep level, because it really was a lot later that my awareness connected all the dots that I didn't realize were even connected to that experience, because that's how dissociated I was from what had happened. And
right.
we'll get further into that later, guys. We don't have enough time to go fully in depth into each part of our story, and we'll try to break it down as we go forward. But really, really great quote from Peter there. So thank you for that.
Okay, so thank you, Jackie, for speaking on some of the lingering effects of trauma Really, honestly, all of them hit home for me. Shattered trust, emotional dysregulation, distorted self-perception, and relationship challenges. But now, so we have experienced this trauma, and it can honestly, and I guess we'll go into this maybe a little bit now, or later on in the podcast series. But I know for a lot of people who have experienced childhood trauma, the trauma can get buried so deep that the memories of it don't resurface until later on in life. If you are someone that is beginning to have any type of memory, or just some, then what I would what I hope that you can look at it as that your body is now allowing you to see, because you are ready to begin to heal it.
Yeah.
For me, it really wasn't until probably my mid 30s that I really began to articulate and acknowledge the trauma. And so, this is really one of the first critical roles for healing trauma. So the first step towards this healing is, like I just said, acknowledging the trauma and recognizing the impact in your life. This is all about self-reflection, and it allows you to begin to validate your emotions and begin to seek that appropriate support. It's just being able, and it's not sitting in the memory, but being able to say, oh my, this is something that I experienced. And and had any feelings of guilt or shame, or letting that dissipate, and then seeking support so your voice can be heard, so you can transmute these experiences, and unpack them if need be. Another quote by Peter Levine: trauma is perhaps the most avoided, ignored, belittled, denied, misunderstood, and untreated cause of human suffering. And let me tell you, like, the therapist that I am working with now, who is a trauma informed, she does trauma incident reduction. She was really, and I mean, we'll get into it, as the podcast goes on, but I've been in therapy since I was about 7. And she was the first therapist. She's a social work therapist, and I definitely encourage social work therapists. She was the first to tell me, okay, so you literally have been living in a state, like your body has been living in a state of trauma since you were about 12.
It
And
is. It's that fight or flight
yeah,
modality, and you're waiting for the next thing to happen. Like I
absolutely.
said, with the hyper awareness, I'm like watching to see who's coming through the door at a nightclub, just in case, that he's going to rob the place, or my mind will go to all of those scenarios.
Absolutely, absolutely. And and mine sometimes, I mean, until really the accelerated part of my healing, it was almost the opposite for me. Like, I had become so disassociated from my body that I found myself in horrible situations and didn't even understand how I'd gotten there.
Yeah.
Just from being so separated from myself, like I had figured out how to just float above it all, which sounds maybe like it's okay, but
No, and that's the thing, is you can become so disconnected from who you are, and you don't even know it because you can't remember what you felt like before.
Absolutely.
So
And
it's hard to bring awareness back to an area that you have no memory of having a feeling or a connection to.
absolutely, yes. And I mean, it has, and for those of you that are listening that are on your own healing journey, be gentle with yourselves. I know for me that the original trauma that I remember, I was 12, and I really wasn't able to look at that and to begin to process it, like I said, until I was in my mid 30s. And the second role of healing, or the second modality that we recommend for healing, is therapeutic interventions. And with this, I feel that it's kind of like the quote, let's see, the teacher appears when the student's ready, or whatever. Is that, I can't remember it exactly, but um therapeutic interventions, I think, can be instrumental if the client is ready. But if you're not ready, like for me, I mean, I started I started family therapy when I was like 7, and I have been to outpatient, inpatient, state run, private run, all kinds of freaking institutions. And while some of them did play a pivotal role in my healing, and I would recommend them, others, I believe, were a detriment because I was not ready to see what I needed to see to heal. But for those that are in a space where they are ready to begin to process some of this, and if you're feeling that maybe the emotions are, too big to handle on your own, which, I mean, Lord knows, again, I went to a lot of them. So don't ever think, try to be I can do everything on my own or whatever. There are safe spaces for people to go to get the help that they need to be able to process these intense emotions, and to develop healthy coping strategies. Yeah,
I
did you want?
agree. Yeah, it was, you know, despite not being ready for a lot of things that I had tried with the therapies and the inpatient or outpatient rehabs and whatnot that I had attended, that information stayed with me. It wasn't
uh
lost upon me. So when the
I
time
love
that
that.
I did get to the point that I was ready to start looking at myself as the solution to the change I wanted to see in my life, those modalities and those tricks and tips were already in my mind, and I was able to utilize them. They
Love
came
that.
back in full force and able to assist me now that I was ready to take that step to healing.
Yes.
It's
And
not for naught. And I hope that out of every experience you can get something that you can take back and reshape and make work for you in some way. We
yeah, and
know that not every therapist or practitioner is necessarily for you. So you do have to have at least enough awareness to be able to know yourself and know a little bit about what your needs are to find the person that will help you best, if that is the path you choose to take.
and I agree there. And I always tell people that if you are looking for a coach, or a therapist or a social worker to work with, that you are interviewing them just as much as they are, seeing if they want to work with you or whatever. Because in order to process these emotions and these memories and these feelings, you have to be with someone that you trust. And
Yeah, if you can't go
hard.
in and be absolutely vulnerable, you're not going to get the value of the service.
Absolutely. And, I started my therapeutic healing journey when I was very young. And this was a time in America during, the 1980s when the mental health system was very different, very different than it is now. I will say there's been a lot of strides, and I know now that, the buzzwords like trauma informed care and cognitive behavioral therapy and, or emotional intelligence, all these, modalities when I started the mental health therapy in the 80s were not implemented. And so honestly, I may still have some, and we can go into that later, but I may still have some trauma around from
There
some of
is
the
truly,
first.
and I have a really hard time taking advice from someone who hasn't been through the depths of traumas that I have. But I mean, we could go on that for a long time, and we'll probably get more into that as soon as we move into the drug section of our
Yeah.
conversations in episode 3.
Oh, I think we can
But
have a
that'll go, and so that'll be a better story for that segue for me.
yes. But yeah, so within therapeutic interventions does come supportive networks. And you can find these outside of, therapy or within, the mental health kind of system. But I actually have found a lot of friends or, just a support network through my time in different like outpatient facilities, and that's been really important for me to build a strong support network. I was a member of a 12-step group for about 6 years, and I still have wonderful friends from that network. So basically, if you are someone that is, ready to begin to process these emotions that have been holding you back, then supportive networks. I mean, finding your people, finding your tribe, community building, just, even, I mean, just getting out of your house. And I know that, for some of us that are processing, past traumas, that even getting out of bed sometimes can be hard. And so, finding and building these strong support networks can honestly be a lifesaver. And
The
find
majority of the
people.
time, I would say that it is. If you have,
Yes,
a strong support system and a sense of purpose and some value that you have been given and you give yourself, you have what you need to
yes,
really make the best of a situation. And I think it's probably the crucialest part in my journey was finding my real support system.
oh, I love that. Yeah, because I know that when I really started, really kind of focusing on my healing journey and beginning to process all of these emotions, that I got to a place where I felt very isolated and alone. And I mean, I was thankful that I knew enough to get a therapist and get some help in that regard. But then, meeting other community members that have maybe had, similar experiences, definitely my spiritual community, and, which is mostly online right now, which is 100% okay too. Thank God we're 21st century here.
Yeah, you have to find it where you can get it. You have to make the best of your situation.
Yeah.
And you can make meaningful connections outside of your city on the internet. I am living proof it is 100% possible. And you just have to get yourself out there. And I know sometimes it can really be a struggle to even get out of bed in the morning when you're dealing with the topics that we are getting into. But
Yes.
we have been there. We want you to know there is light at the end of that tunnel that you're digging through. And like Elizabeth said, we are not given anything that we're not ready to tackle. So if it's coming to your awareness and it keeps coming back up, that means it's ready to be released. It's no longer serving you, and it is time to let go. And I think that's what you're getting into right now. And how do we do that with all the taking care of ourselves a little bit better, right?
Yes, Jackie. So the next is self-care and empowerment. So engaging in self-care practices and empowering activities. There's a quote, esteemable acts build self-esteem. And I always loved that quote, right? Because, when I found myself at my bottom, I was so broken and I had such low self-worth that, I just didn't even know, but just doing little things. Like, I'm really big into volunteering. And so even, just doing little things like that to help, build my esteem. Any type of empowering activity can aid in
helping somebody else gives so much value back. I mean, even sometimes I would just compliment somebody randomly, like especially women. Women are really, really, really hard on themselves. So, I just like, oh my God, your eyes are so beautiful, or that, it makes them feel good and it makes you feel good. And it's a good thing to do. Like, why not show a little love? And that is an empowering, like you said, that piggybacks off your quote there. And I love that. I've never heard you say it, but beautiful.
Oh, esteemable acts build self-esteem. Absolutely. And, so do acts of creativity. So any kind of creative outlet that you have. And, a lot of people get really down on themselves. I mean, actually, like, I posted a video today with me singing in it. And let me tell you, I am not a singer. I am not a singer, but it fills my body with joy. And so I do it, whatever. I don't even care.
Singing is meant for people who love to sing. And I am an advocate for karaoke. It's an amazing release of energy to get out there in your vibe and sing your favorite song without anybody giving a crap what you sound like. Like, it is amazing. And it, like you said about not giving yourself a hard time, I committed because I was in that space where I couldn't get out of bed, or I couldn't even want to shower because I just felt there was nothing in me to give. And I committed to just 10 minutes of meditation a day. I could 100% do more, but if that is the bare minimum I would do, but I would guarantee that I would do it because I could lay in bed with the headphones and be like,
yes, absolutely.
Just to get through one day and then continue off it. And it really is about consistency more than anything.
About consistency. And, it can be hard sometimes to be consistent when you're in a place where, your body physically is still feeling that fight, flight, freeze energy that gets stuck, like.
And you could still be going through a very inconsistent cycle right now, or life. You could be in a very damaging situation. So we do understand that consistency isn't always available, but it's really will be the thing that kind of keeps building off of each other, is that consistent behavior. And if you don't do it and you miss a day, it's okay. Get back up and start again. Absolutely. It's not, this is a self-care, it's self-love. Love yourself enough that you knew you were too tired to do it one day.
Yes. I mean, absolutely. And just, and again, like, just being gentle. So if laying in bed is the best that you can do that day, then that is 100% okay. So, I mean, don't admonish yourself for anything. I mean, that's been really huge for me on my healing journey. I have been pretty much my own worst critic and have self-judged myself, so much throughout my life that it almost seemed foreign when I began to consciously practice self-care and
I
empower.
made up a thing that was like fake it till you make it, because all of those things about telling myself I love myself, like it was fake.
Right.
And I kept doing it, and I telling you friends, one day it just wasn't fake, and I knew it
Right.
wasn't. It was like a light switch. So it can feel forced, and it will, because you're doing something outside your normal behavior pattern. And Elizabeth said it too, the cognitive behavioral therapy, you have to retrain yourself to love yourself. You didn't start hating yourself in one day, and you're not going to start loving yourself in just one day, but
Right.
you know, the repetitive behavior will really help to shape that. And
Yeah, and I was going
no,
to say,
please go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to say that it's, with that, just being gentle with yourself. And I mean, cliche to say, but Rome wasn't built in a day, right? Just the decision of like, okay, today I'm going to focus on what makes me feel good can be counterintuitive, and it can make you feel uncomfortable if you are someone that has been focusing on everyone else and everything exterior instead of focusing on you and your own self-care and the interior, like Jackie was saying with mindfulness meditation, which is basically just getting into this present moment and being here. There's wonderful somatic mindfulness exercises where you can just like kind of the tapping thing where you can just like kind of
there is.
like,
Well,
I'm here now, but even if it feels uncomfortable at first and you think that you're faking it, do it anyways.
yeah,
Do it
exactly.
anyway, because you
It's
are
your ego, it's the resistance. You just have to break through that. It does take a minute to,
it does.
to change behavior patterns.
It
These are
does.
deeply integrated traumas. These are not
Yes.
for the weak. We
Right.
show up for ourselves every single day, because that's a commitment you make to self-healing. And I want to thank you so much for kind of giving us the tools here so that we do understand our role in healing, because we're really going to continue to build off that as we go forward, because that is the main purpose of our show and our channel, is to promote a sense of healing.
Absolutely. And you're welcome, Jackie. And, I'm glad that I started the conversation. And I know that we will be going into so many more self-care modalities, especially in the spiritual part of our podcast. Yeah.
Definitely. I did want us to kind of end off just taking a little bit more of an in-depth look into our own personal journeys, just to
Okay.
relate that back to ourselves. So I drafted, I think we both drafted a few questions that we have for each other, just to kind of give the audience a little bit more of an understanding as to who we are and maybe some of our experiences, so they can connect that to their own personal healing journey. So I know you mentioned that you were about 12 when you had your first experience, you said. When, I guess my first question would be, when is the first time you realized that you had trauma lingering from that experience?
Wow. I'm just getting chills because I've been wanting to share this story. So like Jackie said, I experienced sexual trauma when I was 12. I don't really feel the need to go in and tell particulars, but it did result in, I was missing for a time. I and I when I was found, the cops were called and stuff, but again, this was in the 80s and there just wasn't a lot of follow through. So it was buried it happened and then it just got buried very quickly and not discussed in my family, not discussed anywhere. Fast forward, let's see, that was 12. Fast forward until I was in my early 30s, and my daughter She was about 11, and I was already teaching at this point. I was an English lecturer for close to a decade. So I was teaching, and I was living in Atlanta, and I was working with, I had a therapist at that point. Um, but it was, and this is kind of goes back to Peter Levine's quote about how the trauma, like once it becomes so deep seated, it just starts coming out in so many different ways. So I had been in therapy for so long, but I hadn't been able to pinpoint, really one of the main kind of reasons for being there. And so anyways, so let's see, my daughter was about 11 or so, and I had a therapist and a mentor, and I started like I've always loved driving, and a lot of times I will just drive to like clear my head and stuff. And so I was driving around town, and I started finding myself, and I thought I was going completely crazy, just having these arguments with like nameless, faceless men. And I would just be like, if you fucking touch her, I'll kill. I mean, it was just horrible, like very violent. Like I was like having arguments with like imaginary men, telling them that if they touched my daughter, that I was going to kill them. And I had no idea what was going on. I thought that I was going crazy.
That is almost like, yeah, because
It
I
was,
mean, I was thinking like a psychotic like break almost, right?
yeah, yeah. And so I asked my mentor at the time. I was like, I think I'm going crazy because anytime I'm driving around Atlanta, I'm having like, I mean, and it got to the point where it was like almost like yelling matches with like these imaginary men. And again, I thought I was like, I thought I had totally like broken, something. I was just gone to the other side. I don't know, take me away. And luckily, I had a wonderful woman that I was working with, that I could trust. And she said to me, Elizabeth, when was it that you experienced your trauma? And like at that time, it like I couldn't even put an age to it. Like I knew that it had happened, but it was still so far back. But then I was like, oh my God, I was 12. And she said, so doesn't it make sense that your daughter is about to be 12, that this would be coming up for? And oh my God. Oh, I just cried and cried because I realized that, you know, that was really the first time that I saw how my trauma was affecting me in my present day life.
Wow. I mean, what a terrifying story or way to come across a trigger like that in that way. I wish I could give you a big hug right now.
Aww.
I love you. And it
Thank
so makes sense as your daughter is becoming that age. And I know from my own experience of how I kind of sheltered my children because of my fear
you.
as well, and that probably hindered them a little bit in their own lives. Just having that overprotective mom in those situations. But wow, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
and I'm very over. I mean, I kept my daughter in a freaking bubble,
Yeah,
bubble.
and I
She
think
never had to spend the
yeah,
night. She did, but they always came to my house. I was like, no, if there's a dad in the house, and
yeah,
not no
no, it
offense
makes
to men, or it was just my own personal experience that I was like, oh hell no,
yeah, no, it makes sense.
yeah,
So, because of the trauma, I don't know, I'll probably ask this. It's more of like a two-part question,
yeah.
since we're kind of running later on time, but
Mm-hmm.
don't, I guess, feel the need to shorten it by any means, because it's a big one. But how did that trauma affect your view as you were moving into being sexually active?
Oh, I mean, my and again, maybe we'll get into it. I don't know. I hope that I can be of service to someone else that is walking through, processing their own trauma. But there's several different, I don't know, psychologically, they say that you can either go like the nun or the hoe. Well, I definitely went the hoe. From 12 on, I was incredibly sexually active without having any understanding or knowledge really of even what I was doing. I just, if there was someone that wanted me, I was like, okay, I'm a vessel, a body, that's it. And it was, very, very damaging to my psyche. And, by the time I was 18, I was diagnosed with borderline personality. I think that my disassociation had taken such root that I just split apart. I just was not physically, I was physically there, but emotionally, I wasn't. I wasn't. So it messed me up pretty bad for a long, long time. And I'm still, I'm still processing. I'm by no means an enlightened freaking sage, I'm still walking through this shit, and healing it. And, and I think, and I will say as, you know, and I don't know if this is true or not. I do believe in, miraculous healings. I know that mine, it took me so long to even acknowledge that it had occurred. And it was so ingrained in every part of my mind, body, spirit by the time that I did start healing from it, that, those patterns had been so deeply ingrained that it has taken me, probably close to 20 years on a conscious spiritual journey to be able to process the emotions from that, and to, be able to, reintegrate a little bit. And I'm still working on it, which that actually kind of brings me to a question that I had for you about, your the sexual trauma that you experienced. How did your sexual trauma impact your, spiritual practice or spiritual healing journey?
Wow. Okay. Well, much like you, I am a master of dissociation. And the biggest effect that I think it's funny how you said the nun and the hoe. Well, I went the other way. So I would say none. And I've always been somebody who was in long-term relationships. I have cycles with men, as we mentioned before, with my attachment issues. But I got off on knowing that I was in control. So I didn't have any feeling or desire or need to fulfill a sexual desire in my own body. It wasn't a need for me. So my spiritual practices were really more focused on my mind and self-love up until recently.
Yes.
I guess I was so dissociated, and doing the research that I had, it turns out, or it's most likely turns out that the experience that I had happened before I have conscious awareness of the incident I remember.
Yes.
I did a little bit of digging, so it turns out that it probably happens before I even have a memory of it happening, and that's where the deep-seated fear came from. And for me, it was really a dream that I had that I woke up in a very state of, I guess, for lack of a better word, arousal. And because of that, it was like a light switch. It's like, it does work. Like, there is feeling there. So it was more, that moment made me realize that it's in my mind that I can't connect to it.
Yes.
And it was that moment that it realized that it is a symptom of trauma that I have been unable to be able to gather those feelings by myself. But so yeah, it was a really, I guess, enlightening dream.
That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you
And
for listening. I appreciate that.
yeah, and since this dream where you began to connect with your feelings more and your emotions, your sexual emotions, how has your spiritual journeys been?
It, yeah, it really just immediately started to put everything into awareness, and a lot more things are coming back to me about my behavior patterns around that, and then the knowing that it happened, the memory I have of the time that it did happen. I always had this deep-seated fear, and I knew I had the fear before the incident. I remembered. So putting those two pieces together really put everything in alignment, because I kept thinking I incarnated into this life and somebody murdered me in a past life, or I came in with all these deep-seated traumas, because I
Right.
couldn't associate why I was so scared, even,
Yes.
at 4 years old and 5 years old, when the incident that I remember didn't happen till like 6 or 7. So that, being able to go back and put that there, it opened up everything, and it happened really, really fast, in almost like a miraculous healing kind of way. Like all of a sudden everything made sense. It connected a bunch of other stuff, which we'll get into further when it
Yeah.
comes to my attachment styles and self-worth and items like that. But it, just having that awareness immediately changed for me.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Jackie, for sharing that. I have one more question just about, as you really began your conscious healing spiritual journey, do you have any specific trauma-informed coaches or any modalities that you'd like to discuss that were really instrumental in this shift that occurred for you?
For me, it really is about my behavior patterns, and I'm a creature of habit. And the thing that worked for me and for this way that my brain works was cognitive behavioral therapy. And it
Mm,
really was about reprogramming and reshaping my view of myself, because I had, through repetition and through the negative thoughts and the negative talk to myself, changed my perception of who I am through these negative ways that I was speaking to myself. And over
right,
time, I started to believe it.
right.
And I met a beautiful goddess. She reminds me of this goddess energy, and she really works with helping women get through sexual trauma. And her business is Sacred Orgasmic Living, and she's on Instagram. Her name's Aquaria, and
Okay.
she happened to be at a retreat that I was at, and I almost felt like I manifested her there, because I needed, someone to be able to talk to in an open way about these things. And I didn't really associate too much to that experience being as big of an effect in my life as it was. But after hearing a few of the other women and then speak their story, I felt comfortable to speak my story. And I just started crying. And I couldn't
Mhm.
even say the story, which I have said so many times, dissociated from,
Right.
because I knew
Yeah.
it happened. I knew it had some effect. I couldn't figure out the depths of the effect, but I just was crying so much, and it just kept coming out and coming out and coming out and coming out. And I was really starting to focus then on working through my sacral chakra, because that is where the energy is being held, and doing hip openers, and more stuff just kept coming back. And I thank her a lot for her guidance on that trip, and the vulnerability of the other women that were there that
Yeah.
opened up to share their story, which gave me new awareness into mine. And I mean, 100% links to our show here,
Absolutely.
because that is what brought this level of awareness that opened the door to where we are right now, and I can see it now. And
it's those supportive networks, right? Like
was.
finding a place where you felt safe.
It's
And
true.
that's what you need to begin healing.
Yeah, and if you tell a story and you are a survivor and you have told your story 1,000 times, you can get very dissociated from it, that it's just like
right.
you're going through, but you're not really connecting to it. And that's how I was. It wasn't like it happened to somebody else and I'm just like repeating a movie plot or something. And
Right.
there's so much more to open up on that, and I think we'll get to it when we move into more specific and generalized episodes. But thank you for allowing me the moment and the platform to hopefully share my experience to assist in somebody else's healing, as well as our individual healings, Elizabeth.
Absolutely. I mean, I believe that this podcast, I mean, just working on it with you has, I mean, just been instrumental in just so much joy coming in my life, and knowing that, it's kind of like you said, like even when we first started talking about doing the podcast together, like I feel like our healing, I mean, for both of us, just, like just started accelerating. It was like, okay, we got to get through this shit. But it's just been really beautiful talking with you, and I'm so thankful that I have you as part of my supportive network. And I hope for those of you that have hung tough and are still listening to this podcast, that you guys can,
Well, and I do, and I want to thank you guys so much. The first 6 episodes are really going to be in depth and get to know us a bit better before we move forward. So if they go a little bit longer than, your average half an hour show, please bear with us, because we don't want to undervalue the importance of the topics that we're speaking about. So, pause us and come back after your break if you needed to take a little moment in between.
And so, like Jackie said, these first 6 episodes are really about getting to know us and our journey, with experiencing these topics. So, I'm just really excited that, for those of you that are listening, that y'all are, joining us for this experience, and for creating this community where, we can talk candidly and we can heal together. So thank you.
Amazing.
Yeah. So thank you guys so much for joining us today while we discuss the, very taboo topic of childhood sexual trauma. Your comments and your perspectives are so important to us. Please reach out. If you have any questions for us to explore on our show, or anything else concerning our podcast, contact us at sex, drugs, and spirituality podcast at gmail.com.
Also, if you guys are interested in any individual client offerings, please follow the link below and make sure you mention that you heard of us on Spotify. We do look forward to connecting with the spiritual community at 11 p.m. every Saturday night on Spotify to explore and integrate this together. So I really want to thank you guys so much for joining us and taking the time to hear us and listen to our stories. It's been an amazing evening with you, Elizabeth. I appreciate your vulnerability as we tackle these big topics.
Yes. Well, thank you, Jackie. It's just been amazing and really healing just sitting here and talking with you. And so, I feel safe with you, and, it's, hey, if I can be of service and help, anyone else that's out there, then my work is done. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you guys.
Thank
so
you
much.
guys. We'll see you on episode 2.
Yes. Love and light. Bye.
Love and light.
Sex, Drugs, and Spirituality Podcast. Elizabeth Maria, Unlimited LLC, and Jackie Lyons of Akashic Energy Healing is not responsible nor liable for any advice, course of treatment, diagnosis, or any other information, services, or products that you obtain through this website.